Hello there, boys and girls, and welcome to Pajama Prayers. It's so nice to have you with me this evening. Thank you for taking time to join me. We have a great devotional planned for tonight, and I'm really excited about our story because I wrote the story. So it's one of my favorite, of course, and I can't wait to share it with you. But before we do that, we are going to take just a minute or two to play a racer puzzle, just to kick things off. Are you ready? Good luck to you.
It's a night at the opera for our animal friends, and the performers are singing before a scenic backdrop of mountains, a castle, and the deep blue sea. They'll be hungry after this energetic performance, maybe hungry for some peanuts. Let's help them find the hidden peanuts, and be sure to count out loud as you find each one. There are 25 hidden peanuts. In this round, you'll have 25 seconds to see the whole picture. Find the hidden peanuts. Ready to go nuts? Begin! How many peanuts did you find? If you found 10, that's a good start. Okay, let's try it again. Only this time, you'll have a whole minute to find as many peanuts as you can. Ready? Go! How'd you do that time? I bet you found a few more. If you found 15, you're a nutty buddy. And if you found 20 or more, you're an official nutcracker. Okay, let's go through the whole picture and see where all 25 of the peanuts are hidden. It's hard to tell who's having more fun, the audience or the performers on stage. But one thing is certain, the singers don't mind working for peanuts.
Well, I hope you did really well finding the objects, and I hope you had a really good time. And now we're going to go to the story. Our story is a little bit longer tonight than it usually is, but I think it's a good story. The name of the story is Smiley's Christmas Eve. And it took me a while to write it, boys and girls, and get it published, but it was a fun process and something new that I learned how to do, and I'm really thrilled to share it with you. I hope you enjoy it. Listen while I read Smiley's Christmas Eve. Smiley's Christmas Eve by P.J. Hawkins. It was Christmas Eve at the North Pole. A fresh layer of snow covered the ground. The air was crisp and cold, and the stars twinkled above with excitement. The elves had been hard at work all year making bats and balls, games, dolls, and many other kinds of toys. Now the time had come to get them packed and ready for the big trip with Santa. Smiley sat patiently waiting, holding her breath with the rest of the toys, waiting and wondering if she would be on Santa's list this year. Smiley was a rag doll made from scraps of cloth, stuffed with bits of foam. She didn't look at all like the other dolls. Her hair was made from short, stubby pieces of leftover yarn. The foam stuffing poked out in the most peculiar places and made her appear quite lumpy. Her dress was a patchwork of bits and pieces of multicolored fabric from the scrap box. A beautiful big smile had been carefully stitched on her face. But Smiley was not happy. She felt alone and sad. What if no one wanted a rag doll this year? Doesn't anyone play with rag dolls anymore? Smiley thought to herself. Santa put on his spectacles, leaned back in his rocker, and unrolled a very long wish list. After giving thoughtful consideration to each request, he selected just the right toy for each girl and boy. The workshop was silent. All the toys held their breath, hoping that they would be on Santa's list. For 12 long months, they had dreamed of the Christmas Eve ride from house to house in Santa's bright red sleigh. They wanted so much to hear the jingle of the sleigh bells and feel the cold wind blowing around them. But more than anything, they wanted to see the delight on the faces of the children as they opened their presents on Christmas morning. Some of the toys had spent all year at the workshop because they had not been on Santa's wish list last year. They had been given chores to do, and throughout the year had helped Santa with his elves prepare for this Christmas. The work was not hard. In fact, it was even fun most of the time. Still, it was the dream of every toy to find a home of their very own someday. A home of my own, thought Smiley. Oh, how I would love to have my very own special place. Someone to sing and laugh with. A place with my very own friend to share my dreams. Smiley had spent the last 2 years around the workshop. And while she enjoyed working with Santa and his elves, she still dreamed of finding that special someone to call her own. Only a few toys remained as Santa neared the end of his list. Then it happened. Smiley heard those dreaded words once again. "Well, that's all for this year," said Santa, as he leaned forward in his rocker and took off his spectacles. "Pack it up. Don't forget to pack a few extra bears. You never know when they'll be needed." And with just a few more hours until Christmas Eve, everyone must work hard to have everything ready to go on time. Smiley felt as if her heart would break. She blinked back a tear that was trying very hard to make its way down her cheek. "Think happy thoughts," she said to herself. This always seemed to work before when she had been disappointed. Smiley knew all of those not going on the sleigh would now be given chores. She couldn't cry now. She just couldn't let Santa see a tear stain on her face. She wanted to look her best for him. At that very moment, Santa called her name. "Smiley," said Santa, "you will be in charge of seeing to it that all the dolls going with me have all their belongings with them. It's a big job. Can you handle it?" "Yes," Smiley said in her bravest voice. For the moment, her disappointment seemed to disappear. The smile that had been stitched on her face seemed to glow and brighten her whole face. She felt proud that Santa had given her such an important job. "Smiley," called Santa. There was a short pause. For a brief moment, Smiley's heart seemed to stop beating. Oh, what could it be? What was on his mind? "You helped me last year, didn't you?" he asked. Whew, with a sigh of relief, Smiley quickly replied, "Yes, I did." "Well, then I'm sure you'll do a fine job again," he said. "What a beautiful smile," Smiley heard him say as he turned to walk away. Smiley went to work right away, carefully collecting the belongings of each doll, making sure nothing was left behind. Just as she was getting started, she heard a cheerful little voice call to her. "Hello. My name is Elizabeth. Santa asked me to be your helper." When Smiley looked up, she could not believe her eyes. Standing in front of her was the most beautiful china doll she had ever seen. Her dark black hair was as shiny as silk. It was twisted up in the back and held into place by a pearl-covered clip. Her dress was made of powder blue-colored satin, trimmed with strands of pearls. Her china cheeks blushed a soft pink, and her lips glistened a bright rose to match the polish on her nails. "How is it that no one wanted her?" thought Smiley. "She's so perfect. Surely this must be a mistake. And how was it that she could be so happy about not being on Santa's list?" Elizabeth. What a beautiful name, thought Smiley. It sounds so royal. "How could someone so beautiful not be on Santa's list?" asked Smiley kindly. "Oh, no one asks for china dolls anymore," Elizabeth replied. "Doesn't that make you feel sad?" Smiley asked. "Oh, no, not at all. Actually, I was hoping that I wouldn't be on Santa's list. I would love more than anything to go on the sleigh ride with Santa. But this is where I want to stay." "I don't understand," said Smiley with a puzzled look. "Don't you want someone of your very own to share your dreams with?" "Yes," replied Elizabeth. "That's exactly what I want. But that's not what happens to china dolls. We are fragile and expensive. No one ever plays with us. They say nice things about us and sit us on a shelf or a bed for people to look at. Imagine spending every day just sitting. That is definitely not the life for me." And with that said, they went to work. Baby Amaya needed her bottle, 2 diapers, a bib, and her pacifier. Sophia needed her laptop. Miguel had to have his scooter, and Quentin his apron and chef's hat. On and on they worked until the last doll had been packed. With a sigh of relief, the girls decided to rest a bit. They plopped down in the chairs that surrounded a small table in the corner of the room. They had finished their work with time to spare. What should they do? "We should have a tea party," said Smiley. "Oh, what a splendid idea," said Elizabeth. "But we don't have a tea set." Smiley tiptoed over to a tall cabinet that stood in the corner of the workshop. She carefully opened the doors, and on the bottom shelf was a china teapot with 2 cups and saucers sitting on a beautiful matching serving tray. "Where did you get that?" exclaimed Elizabeth. "It's beautiful. One day I was helping the elves and I found it in a pile of broken toys," said Smiley. 2 of the cups were chipped and the saucers cracked. The broken pieces had to be discarded, but the elves gave me the rest. I always hoped the day would come when I would have someone to share it with. And I have 2 silk handkerchiefs that we can use for napkins. "Let the party begin," shouted Elizabeth. And so it did. They talked and laughed, pretending to be royal guests at the Queen's castle. "One lump or 2? asked Elizabeth as she pretended to offer Smiley the sugar. "Oh, no, dear, thank you. I have quite enough lumps already," replied Smiley, pointing to the lumps of foam sticking out on her arm. Elizabeth laughed so hard she almost fell out of her chair. "Oh, no," said Elizabeth. "I mustn't laugh so hard or I shall break into pieces." They danced around the workshop, singing to the top of their lungs. Suddenly the door opened. Smiley and Elizabeth stopped their singing and quickly turned to see who was at the door. It was Santa. They were having such fun that they had completely forgotten about the time. Night had come, and it was time for Santa to be on his way. Santa had returned to the workshop for his spectacles. As he approached the door, he heard the singing and laughter. "What a jolly good sound! Don't stop on my account," said Santa with a chuckle. He crossed the room and collected his spectacles from the table. "Could I interest you girls in a sleigh ride tonight?" asked Santa. "The trip is long and cold. It would be nice to have some music to keep my spirits high." Smiley and Elizabeth could not believe their ears. This was a dream come true. Of course they wanted to go. They each tried to speak, but no words would come. Instead, they just stood there shaking their heads. "Well, is that a yes?" Santa asked. "Yes!" They both finally got the word out. They were so excited they jumped up and down as if they had springs on their feet. "Well, come then, we must hurry," Santa said, as he bundled them in blankets to keep them warm. All night they sat beside Santa. From rooftop to rooftop they sang. Santa even joined in on occasion. It was just before dawn, and Santa was making his last stop. Elizabeth was snuggled in her warm blanket, fast asleep. "Well, this is our last stop," said Santa. He glanced over at Elizabeth, soundly sleeping, and chuckled. "It looks like it's just the two of us from here on out. Would you like to go down the chimney with me?" he asked. Smiley's eyes twinkled with excitement. Her smile brightened. "Yes," she replied. Santa tucked her in his pack, and down they went. The landing was a little bumpy, and since Smiley was in Santa's pack, she couldn't see. But as soon as they were inside, Santa opened his pack and lifted her out. Smiley gasped as she looked around at the beautiful house. The tree was so big and was decorated to perfection. On the table beside the tree sat a plate with 2 cookies and a glass of milk. There was an envelope leaning against the glass of milk. In it was a note to Santa. Santa gave Smiley the milk and cookies. Then he carefully opened the envelope and began to read the note. It said, "Dear Santa, I am sorry you didn't get my wish list this year. Mommy forgot to mail it. I know this is short notice, but if you could leave me something tonight, I would be so happy. Love, Zoe." Santa looked in his pack and saw the extra bears that had been packed. He started to reach for one and then stopped. He remembered hearing Smiley talking to one of the elves one day about wanting a home of her own. "Smiley," said Santa, "would you like to stay? I know how much you've been dreaming of a home of your own. Zoe is a very good little girl, and this is a beautiful place," he added. Smiley didn't know what to say. Santa was right. She had always said she wanted a home of her own. Her heart began to race. She felt as if she could hardly breathe. She should be so happy, but instead she felt confused. This seemed so sudden, and things were different for her now. There was her new friend Elizabeth, and she enjoyed so much the time they had spent together. And what about all the work she helped with at the workshop all year long? Who would help if she were to leave? And what about Santa? She was the only one left to keep him company on his ride back home. Home, thought Smiley. The word seemed to shout at her. She paused for a minute to ponder the thought. I have had a home all along. I already have my own special place, she thought. She was so caught up in her thoughts she hardly heard Santa. It's up to you, he said. I can't stay, said Smiley. I already have a home. You're absolutely right, said Santa, as he reached into his pack, took out one of the bears and placed it under the tree for Zoe. He bent down and gently scooped Smiley up in his arms. Let's go home, he said. And up the chimney they went. They climbed into his sleigh. And as they flew away, he gave a gleeful shout.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!
The end.
Did you enjoy that story? I sure hope so. I had fun writing it. You know, boys and girls, a lot of times we find ourselves in the same situation as Smiley. We're just not content with what we have. We think something's out there that's better and we just want it. But as Smiley found out, if she had just been patient, if she had just opened her eyes to see, she really was exactly where she wanted to be. She was just a little confused about it because she felt like she had this idea that being somewhere else was going to be better, or doing something different would be better. The best place for us to be, boys and girls, is right where God puts us. He says in His Word that He had plans for us, and they were plans for good and not to harm us. We can trust God. To follow His plan is the best thing you can ever do in your whole life. This week, I would love for you to just pray and talk to Jesus and just ask Him to help you be content with where you are and to do your best at everything you do until He moves you elsewhere for another something that He has planned for you. He has great plans for you. So enjoy where you are now and enjoy where He takes you. He's a good God, boys and girls, and He loves you so much that He would never bring harm to you. He's always watching over you and always being with you. I hope you have a great holiday season, the rest of it, a Merry Christmas. And know that I love you to pieces. And come back again next Saturday for another great story. Until then, turn to someone there with you and say,
You are worth more than you know, capable of more than you think, and loved more than you can imagine. Good night.
Thank you.